Hello and welcome to Everyday CX ISM, the podcast that looks at real human experiences and the business decisions behind them. My name is Katie Stabler. I am the founder and director of Cultivate Customer Experience by Design, an award-winning global customer experience agency. Each week, we take a real human-to-business experience, unpick what's happening and ask what can we all do differently. Now this week, I've got another hotel experience to share. Gosh, we're only 5 episodes in and I think this is the second hotel experience. Will it be good? Will it be bad? Let's find out. So as always, I'll share the experience. I'd love for you to pop yourselves in my shoes and see if you feel what I felt during this experience. So to get you in the mood, I've been traveling for a few days, working, traveling, really busy few days. And I was driving to this hotel. I wouldn't be arriving until quite late, 7 or 8 o'clock at the evening. And when I got near to the hotel, oh my gosh, it was huge and looming. It was quite breathtaking, if I'm honest. And, I was tired. I was a little bit overwhelmed. The sat-nav was really struggling at the last bit to get me into the hotel entrance. But I knew, fantastically, that I had a digital check-in key, which I've never really experienced much before, but this was great. So I had the check-in key, I'd pre-checked in, meant I didn't have to go to reception. I was tired, I just wanted to get into my room, and I have this digital check-in key to enable me to do so. Great. I pull up to the hotel, pull straight into the car park, which is pretty easy to see and to find. And when I got into the car park, I noticed the signs to say that it was £25 per night, which I thought was a little bit expensive. But hey, it is what it is. However, I thought I'll just check at reception to see if this could be validated. Rather than going straight to my room as I had planned, I did swing by reception and I mentioned, didn't expect the hotel car park to be quite that pricey. Do you validate parking? Is there anything you can do as included? No, she said, we don't validate parking. That is the price. And there you go. So it was what it was. I just had to suck that up. Never mind. So I went up to my room and I was very pleasantly surprised by my room. It was beautiful. I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised. It's a 5-star, gorgeous hotel. And the room was reflective of that. It was a lovely big suite. And I instantly settled in and thought, yes, I'm just going to order some room service, chill for a couple of hours and then get my head down. So I did. I went to order room service and there wasn't a room service menu in the room. Instead, there was a QR code. Okay, fine. Scan the QR code. The QR code didn't work. So I had to ring old school, pick up the phone and actually ring somebody. And I spoke to somebody straight away, of course, and they said they'd bring me up the menu, which was fine. But I said, whilst you're on your way up, will you bring me a glass of wine as well? No problem. Great. You will see alcohol as an emerging theme in these podcast stories. So a few minutes later, not long at all, lovely lady came to my room with the menu and a glass of wine and a charge. So they want me to pay for the wine there and then. Fine, not a problem. Even though there was a card on the account, but never mind. But not only did they want me to pay for the wine, there was a £5 tray charge and a 20% service charge. So there's about 70% increase on the bill over and above the glass of wine itself. Now, I wouldn't have even ordered that glass of wine individually. I would have ordered it with my room service, but I only asked for it to be brought up because they were bringing the menu at that time. So I did dispute that with the lady and didn't even know about the tray charge because obviously I didn't have a menu to hand, so I couldn't see that there was a tray charge. Anyway, I disputed it with the lady. I explained the situation. She said, of course, pay this and we'll waive the tray charge on your food coming up to the room. I was like, okay, that'll do. But a bit of irritation had crept in there. So I had my room service and the room service came and the food was delicious. And as promised, the tray charge was waived, although the 20% service charge wasn't. Why are they charging a service charge and a tray charge? Isn't the tray charge the service charge? You're not getting the same kind of service as you would if you were in a restaurant. Anyway, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. So, had my food, got into bed, and as per usual, wanted to grab a bottle of the water to put by my bedside in case I needed to drink throughout the evening, only to find that there wasn't any water in the room. Now, again, it's a 5-star hotel. Even hotels with lesser stars most often have complimentary water in the room. I checked in the fridge, there was no water, so I went to bed thirsty. The next morning, I went downstairs and I mentioned to reception that there wasn't any water in the room, thinking that it was perhaps an error. And she explained, no, actually, they do provide complimentary water, but it's available on room service. So I didn't dig into that further, but afterwards I was thinking, if you're only ordering the water, does that mean there's also a tray and service charge, and therefore the water actually isn't free and is probably quite expensive for water? Anyway, later that evening on the second night, I ordered room service and water on there, so didn't pay duplicate tray charges. But going back to that day, I'd arranged for a client to come to this hotel because I deliberately stayed in this hotel because it was near to this client that I was meeting. I'd arranged for them to come to the hotel. I was going to treat them to a lovely slap-up lunch in the beautiful restaurant that I'd seen on their website. I couldn't find the restaurant, interestingly enough. I mean, I tell you, this place is absolutely huge. It is huge. So I nipped to reception, and again, I asked whereabouts the restaurant was and could I be directed there. And I was told that that restaurant was closed because it's only a seasonal restaurant. Frustrating. Again, it wasn't the be-all and end-all. There was a bar area which served a light daytime menu, which she could come and join me in, and which she did. And we had a pleasant time, but it just wasn't quite the impact that I wanted to create. It wasn't quite the treat that I wanted to give her. The plus side, however, is with every cup of coffee, you got a beautiful little millionaire shortbread, which was absolutely delicious and certainly an upgrade on the standard little biscuit that you often get with a drink. So that was great. Anyway, I had a nice trip. Yes, there was a few niggles, nothing to particularly cause any real negative impact or harm. As I was leaving, I paid, including the extra £50 of parking for the 2 nights that I was there. I got into the car and I looked for the nearest charger because I drive an EV, and the charger was fantastically just like a couple of minutes walk away, in fact. So I drove there only to find that the charger was located in another of the hotel's car parks. The hotel is that big. It has a number of car parks. And this car park, with it being an outdoor car park compared to the indoor car park that I landed in, was half the price. So again, put yourself in my shoes when I arrived at the hotel. I'd been traveling for days. I'd driven a few hours to get to this particular hotel. It was late at night. I just wanted to get into the room. I was a bit discombobulated with the awe of the size of the hotel and the tricky sat-nav direction. I didn't notice any signage for different car parks. There may well have been them, I'm going to acknowledge that, but I didn't notice them. I just landed in the first hotel car park that my sat-nav took me to. When I went to reception and asked about the cost of the parking, surely that would be a clear indicator that I'm a cost-conscious customer, and maybe that would have been the moment where the lady would have said, oh, but there is another car park just a couple of minutes down the road, half the price. Anyway, that unfortunately was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back and kind of tipped my experience over into negative. So let's just walk through that experience. I mean, what do you think? Yes. It's not the worst, of course, but we are digging into customer experience here and how, as people, these business decisions, these business actions, these people actions, process technology, whatever it is, how they make us, as Mr. and Mrs. Customer, feel. So let's break down what's happened here. I mean, first of all, there's this increased utilization of digital, which obviously is aimed to create a smoother customer experience. And yes, the pre-arrival check-in with the digital key card would be fantastic if there wasn't my need to go to reception anyway. But great, enables a seamless, smooth entry into the hotel. Then, however, there's the lack of the menu in the room, instead replaced by a QR code. Is that necessarily a more seamless and smooth experience for the hotel guest? Is it a better experience? I mean, for me, I don't know. I don't really care whether I've got a physical menu or a digital menu. But what I do care is that I have at least one. And in this case, that, I suppose, attempt at making things better with the digital QR code, and certainly, I think, cost savings on the side of the hotel, actually made for a worse experience because it didn't work. So it wasn't checked, it didn't work. Obviously, the hotel didn't know that it wasn't working, which isn't really good enough. So that experience was actually inhibited through the broken digital process. And then keeping on the theme of the menu, that experience was further inhibited by the tray charge. Now, okay, a tray charge isn't overly uncommon, but in this instance, I hadn't even considered the tray charge on that, particularly that first order, because I hadn't seen the room service menu. So I had no prior information of that tray charge. And to be honest, I don't order enough room service to instantly be remembered at the point of order that, oh yeah, there's probably going to be a tray charge on here. So the fact that I'd not actually technically ordered a room service, I'd asked for a menu to be brought up to the room, which should have been there in the first place. And while she was coming up, can you bring me that glass of wine? To then have that tray charge added and a service charge, that created a level of frustration. It probably wouldn't have been that level of frustration if I'd have known about the tray charge in advance, but of course I didn't have the menu. So it did. Now, she did handle it very well, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place, especially not for a 5-star hotel. Also, let's just question their policy on having a tray charge and a service charge added to the room service bill. Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't sit comfortably with me. A £5 tray charge as standard and a 20% service charge on top. What's the difference between a service charge and a tray charge? Surely the service charge is the tray charge, or vice versa. You know what I mean? You're not getting any additional service. The service charge in the restaurant, maybe you can understand that, even though I know some people don't like that being automatically added. But a service charge and a tray charge on the same bill seems a little bit excessive. And certainly, if I was running that hotel, I would most definitely question that policy. And on this thread, let's talk about the complimentary water. I mean, that's an interesting one. So they've made a decision, they've made a policy change to not include complimentary water in the room as standard, but as a request. Now, she told me it's available on room service. I didn't qualify that meant for definite that there would be the tray charge on top of that, but surely they would. If someone calls down for water, what's the difference between someone bringing a bottle of water or a bottle of wine? If that's the case, I mean, that's outrageous, but it may be that they do just bring water without a tray charge. But also, that's at the inconvenience to me, Mrs. Customer. I mean, there was nothing in that room that told me that water was available for free if I requested it. By the time I'd noticed that it wasn't available, it was too late. I was already primed and ready for bed. I wasn't going to be ringing down for room service at that point to bring water up to the room, although waking up in the middle of the night rather in need of a drink, I wish I had. But that again does not seem like a particularly customer-friendly policy. And surely, why would they have done that? Is it a cost-saving issue? I mean, I assume if a guest doesn't want the water, they leave it in the room. I mean, I don't know. Have they been assessing how many empty bottles have been left versus how many have been taken and they don't like that? It just seems like a very odd policy to me. And again, a very uncustomer friendly policy, one I would definitely question. And then let's come to the big one, really. The big one that will stick. It's the parking sting. When I'm going to a 5-star hotel, first of all, yeah, do you know what? I'd expect the parking to be included. I expect that to be part of the price. I don't want it to be added on. I would expect it to be part of the price. I know some of you are probably going to come for me over that because, again, paying for parking in addition to a hotel is not particularly uncommon. But it's not a nice feeling, I don't think, to have extra charges like that chucked on top. Regardless of that, though, I was willing to just accept and concede that the parking came at a cost, fine, until I found out that there was more parking available at a cheaper rate. And clearly, my going to that lady at reception when I arrived and mentioned about the cost of the parking, clearly that was a signal that I am a cost-conscious customer. And if that lady had just thought a little bit more about what I was asking and how she could help, she would have directed me to the other car park. So I have to ask, was that a purely unconscious misdemeanor? Did she just not think that that's perhaps the advice or information she should have passed on to me? Or are the staff encouraged to get people to park in the more expensive car park? I don't know. And actually, finally, I left all of this feedback for the hotel. So after my visit, I got the quite typical email request for feedback, and I left all of this for them. Do you think I got a response? Nope. Nothing. Not a thank you, not an answer to any of my questions, not commentary to any of the feedback. Nothing. So herein lies the problem of asking for feedback. If you're not going to respond to it or let your customers know you're using it, actually, you're not making them feel very valued, and you're very unlikely to get feedback in the future. And that's all been very negative. But let's remember there were a couple of positives. You know, the digital check-in key card, fantastic. And it's such a small touch, but those little mini millionaire shortbreads, instead of the typical kind of Biscoff biscuit that you often get, brilliant. Now that, when I think about it, it makes me think there is such a disparity, because some of these things seem like they are cost-saving initiatives. You know, the digitization of the menu in the room, not putting water in the room, that feels like it's trying to save cost. But then these little millionaire shortbreads, they can't have been particularly cheap compared to, you know, buying a bulk box of Biscoff biscuits. So try saying that when you've had a few. So yeah, there's some interesting decisions being made here. But what can we take away from this? As businesses, forget about being hotel specific, but as businesses, what can we take away from this experience and how this experience has made me, Mrs. Customer, feel? So you have to think about your experience as a whole. Whilst there was absolutely some great touches here, you know, the shortbread, the beautiful site, the beautiful room, the digital check-in, these things set the bar for the experience. But if they're not consistently applied across the entire experience, then what you're actually doing is creating this high expectation because there are some things being done brilliantly. And unfortunately, the expectation isn't being met because there are things that are really failing, like the QR code, like the failure of complimentary water, like the member of staff who failed to really identify what the customer query was. And then there's charging for the absence of your own failures. Now, this is a strange one, granted, but the fact that I was charged the tray charge and the service charge for a glass of wine that I'd asked to be brought up purely because I needed the menu, which wasn't put in the room, is a real misdemeanor. Now, I'm sure that it wasn't thought of intentionally like that, but that this is kind of the point, is it wasn't thought of at all. I really think the member of staff that picked up the phone, that went and got me that drink, that went and got me that menu and came to my room should have considered the situation a little bit better and should have not applied that charge. There's a theme of lack of information here as well. So the restaurant that I wanted to go to, there was no mention on the website that it was closed. So the reason I knew about the website in the first place was because I'd seen it on the website. There was no mention that it was closed for seasonality. Certainly not in the main print on anywhere on the website. There's also the failure of giving the full information about the car parks, a people failure, training failure, that inability. Being proactive with information can stop so many customer experience niggles. It is unbelievable. We just need to make sure that throughout all of our customer touch points, the information is up to date, it's relevant, and it is shared. Look, in all seriousness, any hotel or business doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to try and be consistent. And this is one of the most common downfalls in customer experience. It is that inconsistency. And why does inconsistency happen? Generally speaking, because the customer experience isn't thoroughly designed and it isn't holistically designed. You know, normally it's one person looking after this part of the business, one person looking after this part of the business. And actually, very few organizations bring together that entire experience under one clear lens to understand and design for what is happening. And this is a perfect example of some great touch points, but also a lot of failure points. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? What would you think if you are Mrs. Customer in my shoes? How would you react? How would you have felt about all those little touch points? And on that point, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave comments and questions. You can also leave your comments and continue the conversation on LinkedIn or Instagram if you'd like the behind the scenes version of customer experience. And as always, happy CXing.